This is likely going to be the last video that I put out for quite some time because I'm putting a lot of energy into the development of a comprehensive text for center to edge aiming. But in conjunction with the last video concerning knowing the visuals in full stance, I wanted to go ahead and tie in the use of spin with center to edge aiming. We know that CTE is a center cue ball system, but there's no way for getting around using spin, particularly for positional play. Now, spin is an iffy proposition. And Hal has commented before to me, and I'm sure to you as well, that if you want to use spin with centered edge aiming, then you're on your own. Well, I can understand why he made that comment, because there's lots of considerations and lots of factors that have to be considered when you're using spin. For example, I've got a low deflection shaft. A lot of people choose to use just a regular shaft. So there's a lot of factors that have to be looked at when you're using spin. But considering the information that I put forth in the last video, this can likely help you. This is what has evolved with me over my many years with CTE, and I'll share that with you at this point. Let's just look at the use of spin as a path of least resistance. In other words, we could interchange the word resistance to adjustment. What's the strongest approach to continue with what you know by using the least amount of adjustment? Well, when you're working with this 15 and outside and you need a little bit of outside spin, well, you go to your 15. You're already a half a tip on the outside, so perhaps that half a tip will work. So that's really convenient for that outside spin shot there. Low outside spin is the favorite shot of the pros, I would say. So once again, I have a low outside here. So when I come in on this shot and establish my 15 with my half tip outside, I could pivot for just a little bit more spin. Or I could take that 15 outside and move the tip in a little closer to center, perhaps for a quarter tip of outside. So I'm working with my half tip pre-pivot position in conjunction with my 15-degree perception. So if that half tip pre-pivot position will let me do the job, then I shouldn't do anything else. Now, what I mean by doing anything else is I'm not having to move my bridge V around. When you have to move your bridge V around, that's when things start to get a little bit more iffy. So let's say that I want to put more spin on the ball than what this half tip pre-pivot position is going to allow me to do. So what I'm going to do is I've got a 15 outside here. I'm going to sweep right into center cue ball, looking at the 15-degree perception to the best of my ability from that position. So I'm going to sweep in to center ball, looking at the 15. Basically, my tip is pointing at the 15. So from there, from there I can load this up with a lot more spin than I could from the half tip pre-pivot position. So I'll do that again from this other side right here. This is a 15. This is a 15 from the outside. So if I want to put a lot of spin on this ball, I'm just going to sweep right into center cue ball with my tip pointed at the 15. I'm looking at a 15 to the best of my ability here, and then I can put a nice amount of spin on that ball. Now, I'm not going to get into spin shots where you're twirling the cue ball. That's another topic that I will address later, and there's some very strong information for that. But I'm just going to cover some basic spin application here to where you can continue in a real strong way with your work with CTE. Now, let's say that I've got a 15 from the inside. Well, I'm going to go to my half tip position, establish my 15, go to center. Now, I'm coming across the center of the cue ball, so I can use a little bit of spin here, and I'm okay. So, in other words, I'm not having to change my tip position. I'm just getting to use a little bit of backhand English, just swiveling my cue for the spin that I need. So once again, I'll do that from this side. This is a 15 and inside. So I'm going to establish my half tip pre-pivot position. I'm going to go to center. Now, I've got a little bit of elevation in my cue here, and that's okay. You know, you want to be careful about always trying to keep your cue level. When pros are using low outside, they've got a slight elevation in their cue, and that's friendly for pocketing balls. So anyway, here's this 15 on the inside. I'm slightly elevated. I'm going to go to center. Now I can do a little bit more here. I'm not quite a half a tip. So I was able to keep my bridge V positioned nicely for that shot. Now, let's say I have a 15 from the inside and I want to load it up pretty good. Well, that requires perhaps an adjustment with my bridge V. So what I'm going to do is I'm looking at a 15 and inside here. So what I'm going to do, instead of going directly into my half tip pre-pivot position, I'm going to sweep directly to center. I'm going to go right to center, looking at the 15. So I'm looking at a thick shot here. Now I can pivot my cue for a lot of spin there. So I'll do that again. There's a 15 and inside. I'm just going to go right to center ball, looking at the 15. See, we're making an adjustment here. So the adjustment is I'm taking my tip to center cue ball, looking at the 15, and then I can apply my spin. So we're getting to use things for our spin application that we're familiar with, things that we know. Very repeatable process. Now let's take a look at inside spin. So you can take those 15s that I just did and you can apply that to the 30 or 45 or 60 as well. Let's look at inside spin. If I have an outside 15 here and I want to put some inside on this ball, I set up on my half tip, establish my 15. Now when I come to center, I can add some inside spin to here. It might be up to my judgment on my speed and my spin. But I'm not going to have to adjust my bridge V from there. It's very important to note that on this outside pivot direction, once I go to center, now I can put some spin on this ball depending on my speed and spin and my experience with using spin. But the key thing there is that I did not have to adjust my bridge V. So let's see what happens on a 30. Well, the 30 and inside, the 30 outside would be the same thing as the 15 inside. So let's look at one from this side, 15 and outside. So I've got a 15 and outside here. So there's my 15 and outside. So I can move my cue around here and do some things with inside spin without having to adjust my V. Now, there's other techniques for arriving at how you're going to use spin, but what we're looking at is the path of least resistance, the path of least adjustment that has to occur. So, one more time, when you're coming in from the outside, you can swivel your cue, but you just have to pay attention to speed and spin. So there's once again, there's my 15. The pivot direction is from the outside. So once I get to center, I can play around here with my tip position, and as long as my speed and my spin are correct, then I can pocket a lot of balls using that technique without having to adjust my V. So you see that V is key, because that V is the foundation for the shot, because that V is based upon a center ball shot. Now let's look at what happens when the pivot direction comes from the inside. Well, let's just use a 30 here. So this is a 30 and inside. Well, I'm a half tip on the inside. Now this may work if my speed and my spin would be right. But if I want to shoot that ball softly, then I might have to do what I'm now calling a bridge shift. So there's my 30 and my inside right there. Now if I want to shoot this ball softly, it's not going to make it. So I just do a slight bridge shift, which allows me to go to the right with my entire bridge, specifically my bridge V. So there's my half tip placement there to the inside. So if I'm going to shoot soft, that won't make it. So I'm just going to do a little bridge shift. Now I can pocket that ball. So you're seeing some patterns, and I'm going to review those very quickly. If I want to do outside spin for this 15 and outside, as long as I'm not using a lot of spin, I'm okay to work with that half tip from the outside. If I want more spin, then from this outside pivot direction for this 15 outside, I'm just going to go directly to a 15-degree aim with my tip at center cue ball, and I can pivot for a lot of outside spin there. Now, if I'm going to do this is a 30 inside. if I want some outside spin here, once I get the center, I can do a little bit, maybe up to a half tip. But if I want a lot of spin, then, and we're not talking about spinning the ball, if I want a lot of spin, I'm just going to sweep right into my tip pointing directly at the 30. So my tip's basically pointing at the edge of the ball. Then I can pivot my cue for the spin. So to recap the inside spin, if my pivot direction is coming from the outside, I'm just going to go right across the middle. There's my 15, go to center. Now, whatever I want to do, I can do it from here as long as my speed and spin is correct. If I'm coming from the inside, let's say this is a 30 here, and I'm coming from the inside, then I may need to adjust my V much more frequently than I would if I was coming from the outside. So if I'm coming from the inside and I hit this ball pretty hard, I can probably do what I need to do with a half tip of the already in position pre-pivot half tip inside. Or I can do this. This is a 30. I'm a half tip inside, so I might just swivel my cue from this position here, which is a pretty nice technique. But there are some instances when you're using inside spin to where you might want to do a complete bridge shift in order for your spin to work. This is the most complete, systematic way for spin application that I've presented thus far. It's very repeatable. Now, I have not dealt here with when you actually spin the ball. I'll do that at another time, but the information is very strong for that as well. The adjustments are much more pronounced because you're spinning the ball. Here we're basically just putting side spin on the ball, but when you're spinning the ball, that's getting into a different aspect of spin. But you know, I wanted to share this with you because this goes hand in hand with the previous video that I put out, and I don't want to leave anybody hanging on good information that can be useful. I appreciate everyone's support. So I'm going to be signing off for a while because I've got to get my mental energies fully engaged in putting this text together that's going to be very comprehensive. So, you know, thank you once again for your attention.